Good evening. I'm coming to you late Friday evening before I head out. I'm at the Pocahontas building in my office here in Richmond on Capitol Square. Wanted to make sure that I gave you an update from this extremely busy week that we just had here at the Capitol. First, but let me start off with Monday, MLK Day. Back home, you all did an amazing job. Mayor Price, Congressman Scott, Sheriff Morgan, and I got together for a day of action to celebrate and honor the life of Martin Luther King Jr. One of the things that he really understood was the importance of economic justice and along with that economic security for families. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure we had something meaningful for our residents to get involved with, and that was a food drive at the Virginia Peninsula Food Bank. You all did an amazing job. We raised enough money and gathered enough items to feed for more than 26,000 meals. And you all know what a meal can do for our neighbors who are finding themselves in a period of food insecurity. 26,000 miles will impact our local community immensely. And so I just want to say congratulations and thank you for that hard work. We had groups like Virginia Unity Project, Riverside Health Systems, lots and lots of people showed up in big ways, and we just want to say thank you for that. Here in Richmond, it was not a holiday. We had business as usual, and I love that constituents took the time to take that holiday and come on up and visit. So we had some great visitors from all over the political spectrum, and we were able to hear from them and have great meetings with them. After session on Monday, House Bill 1998 that deals with the ability for public safety officials to be able to get bodily fluids tested if they were exposed to said bodily fluids in the exercise of their daily duties at work. And so it expedites their petition in front of the General District Court if they needed to get someone to turn over a sample to test the blood to make sure, that they don't have HIV, hepatitis B, or hepatitis C. And if they do find out that the blood has that, or that the bodily fluids has that they know how to protect themselves from getting that disease as well. So it's really to look out for our public safety officials, healthcare workers, and school division employees. So that's really important. That got passed out from the full courts committee. So then that means that it was headed to the House floor. Right after that, there was a really, really, really important moment. Probably one of the most important moments of my career thus far. We had someone reach out to me from Twitter, a Twitter message, to talk about a situation that their family experienced, a nightmare situation, but looking for someone to help them work for legislative fixes for what they endured. We had Francesca, a amazing, inspirational, and courageous 15-year-old come up and talk about her horrific experience of abduction and sexual assault prior to the start of her 9th grade year. Unfortunately, to add insult to injury, she was supposed to go to school every day with her assailant. And so she got a protective order. But what didn't happen was notification of the adults in her life to help her navigate her safety plan to be able to enjoy her educational journey and to be able to focus on her studies. And that's because once the principal is notified of a protective order, that's as far as it goes in the school building. So HB 1997 was to allow for more hands-on professional staff at the school to be able to help both the assailant and the victim navigate their school day in safe and secure ways. One, so that the victim does not have to be re-traumatized by interacting with his or her assailant on a daily basis. But two, also to make sure that the assailant follows the protective order so that they would not become further court involved. And so this bill would allow for the principal to talk to a few more adults in the school, and that was passed out of the House Courts Subcommittee, and that was Monday. On Tuesday, we had even more visitors, and I also presented House Bill 2473 in front of a Commerce and Labor Subcommittee. And I'm not sure if you all know, but we still have some pretty racist and unfortunate language still in our code, and we have exemptions from the minimum wage requirement in our code, and it was basically from the Jim Crow era. It's right out of the Jim Crow playbook, and it targets jobs that typically African Americans held in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s. And so we're trying to get that language struck to make sure anyone still working in those professions are not exempt from the minimum wage requirement, so that they too will have a protection and be able to make minimum wage. And that bill, I will post the video from that bill introduction because it's hit an interesting snag. Some members of the Commerce and Labor Subcommittee want to make sure that the governor is not going to amend that bill and turn it into a minimum wage increase bill. And so they're kind of holding it hostage until they hear back from the governor. I'll talk more about that, but that bill went by for the day with no action, and as they're waiting to hear from me or from the governor the next step. Then on Wednesday, I was able to talk about, during Friendsgiving back in November, I had my friends come over for a party. We got together, had a great time, but I also asked that they brought hotel-sized toiletries so that we can make packets and put in a washcloth and give that to Port, or Link, who runs a program called Port, and they run, along with partners and churches in the community, homeless shelters for the winter. So we give those packets of body wash and shampoo, conditioner, and lotion, along with the washcloth, just to make their stay at the homeless shelter just even a little bit better. And showers are provided so they can utilize the toiletries. So when I got here on Wednesday, I made an announcement for all on Capitol Square to include elected officials, legislative assistants, lobbyists, administrative assistants, whoever could hear the announcement, to know that I'm collecting toiletries so that we can do that, but even on a larger scale. And already I've received a pretty good amount of donations, so that's going really well. That evening, my subcommittee on health, welfare, and institutions met, and we had a 3-hour-long subcommittee meeting where we were hearing all kinds of bills about transparency for patient access to information, information about Lyme disease and the inefficiency of Lyme disease testing. I mean, you name it, and we heard a bill about it. And it was probably one of the best subcommittee meetings I've been to because of the level of conversation we were able to have. And I was able to share some of my expertise that I gained from working in the dental office profession, working a lot with insurance and patients and what's covered, what's not covered, and all of that for about 10 years. And so I was able to really speak up about some of the issues and ask some good questions about some of the other issues to make sure that we had a really quality conversation before we passed or rejected the bills that came before us. And then on Thursday, I presented very early in the morning a bill, House Bill 1999, which encourages or directs the Virginia Department of Emergency Management to work within its own state agencies and local governments to make sure that as they're creating emergency preparedness plans, that they are including those that are not proficient in English, those with disabilities, to include hearing loss, and also to include those with special needs. Unfortunately, I think I made a pretty good case for why we need to make sure that all Virginians are included in our emergency preparedness plans. I included the fact of having an entire neighborhood within the southeast community of Newport News unaware of the mandatory evacuation zone during Hurricane Florence. I think I made a pretty good case for why we should really care about all Virginians having equal access to emergency preparedness announcements, educational materials. But unfortunately, that bill did not pass. And you have my absolute commitment that I will continue to work on that. Also on Thursday, which was a pretty big day, I did my bill introduction for House Bill 1998, the one that I just spoke of for the public safety officials. It was on second reading, so I did my introduction from the floor. It was engrossed and passed on to its third reading. I also introduced House Bill 2000, which really came from the activism of a group of citizens in my area. You'll remember the Aqua Vista situation where residents did not have air conditioning. And they had not had air conditioning for quite a while, even though their lease and all of the documents state that property management would provide air conditioning. Well, we did a little research and we found out that the building code only requires someone who advertises that they have air conditioning to cool the room to 80 degrees. That's it. That was the only requirement. So once a room has been cooled to 80 degrees, a property manager or building owner has met the requirement. And that is unacceptable. And so we brought House Bill 2000 in order to really get at the heart of that and reduce that to at least 77 degrees, which is still warm, but it's a little bit better than 80 degrees. We had a hearty discussion, which I will post the video from, but there's a little issue about the process. Some folks have some opposition to me trying to put into code what is usually handled through regulations. So there was no action taken on that bill. And then next week, the full committee of general laws will hear that and will hopefully have come to a resolution by then. I also spoke as chief co-patron of House Bill 1760, and that is to try and get some consumer protections in place for those of us who are student loan borrowers. I'm not sure if you know, but student loan debt is second only to mortgage debt here in Virginia. But student loan student loan servicers are not regulated at all. And so the consumer or the borrower has no protections. And right now, the protections are being handled on the state level through lawsuits. So Navient has been sued, and some of the other servicers have been sued. But Virginia could really step up and make sure that those loan servicers have some rules and regulations for them to operate by. But unfortunately, that bill died. And even one of the delegates said that he didn't even see why loan servicers were a thing. Why didn't we just go to the bank and get our loan? And there are all kinds of unfortunate misunderstandings of what real life looks like for those of us that needed help paying for our education. And so we tried to shed light. Delegate Simon is the chief patron and I'm chief co-patron. We tried to shed light on the process, those of us that have had to take out student loans, and talk about some of the bad actors out there. And unfortunately, that bill did not get passed, but we are committed to continuing to really work hard on student loan debt and at least let people know what the crippling student loan debt is doing in the lives of real life Virginians. And so we will continue to spread awareness. We got the ombudsman, office set up in legislation from last year, and I'll share more information about that. They're soon to be up and running. But we also presented a bill for the Department of Medical Assistance Services, and that bill passed out of the Subcommittee for Health, Welfare, and Institutions, and also a bill about qualified mental health professionals. And so we got that bill passed out of Subcommittee from HWI. I'll talk more about those next week when they pass out of full committee. And then at our Virginia Legislative Black Caucus meeting, we had a couple of presenters, but one of the ones that stuck out to me was the president of Virginia State University did a presentation on what access to education really looks like when you are servicing a student body that has a large percentage of students who are eligible for Pell Grants. And what does that mean on per pupil spending, the state investment into our HBCUs who are really doing some amazing work on the front lines, and how poverty really impacts our access to education and the cycle of poverty if we do not invest in the educational track and journey of those students. So this update is a little bit longer than the last one, but it's been such a busy week and I'm trying to talk quickly. But Friday, today, as I said about the House bill for the public safety officials, the healthcare workers, and the school division employees, House Bill 1998 did pass on the uncontested block of bills today from the House of Delegates. So it is headed right to the Senate, and I'm very hopeful. We have been working in the interim. The good folks representing the city of Hampton that brought this bill to my attention, and I have been working with the senators in the interim. So we're very, very hopeful that we've come to language that the Senate Courts Committee and senators can agree to as well. And hopefully that bill will be headed to the governor. We also had a meeting today with budget staff that work with the budget very closely. And it's because I needed to learn more about how the cost assessments or fiscal impact statements are really done to say how much your piece of legislation would cost the state, so that when we pass the bill, then it goes to the appropriations. We know how to really argue for the money. It's one thing to pass a bill, but if it goes unfunded, it basically dies there and does not head to the Senate or to the governor. And so I have a couple of bills that have fiscal impact statements, meaning that it would cost the state some money to implement. But I will talk about those later as I go next week, as I go before the Appropriations Committee and really argue the merit of the bill and why I think the money should be invested in that. And so that finishes out this week. I want to let you know a couple of things that are happening next week. We're going to have more visitors next week. Will it be you? Because it's super, super easy to come up and visit. If you have more questions about that, make sure you send me an email, text, or call me. If you have my number, call our office, send me a message on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. But we would love to have constituents come up. We will have visitors from the Lambda Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated come up, and also advocates with the Peninsula Agency on Aging. So we're looking really forward to that one Tuesday. Excuse me, and then I will go before, like I said, the Appropriations Committee, specifically speaking about House Bill 1994 that I'm working very closely with Newport News on, that would allow local law enforcement to process required fingerprint background checks for child daycare programs. I will also have another crack at talking about those minimum wage exemptions to get that Jim Crow era language out of our code so that anyone in those exempted categories have the opportunity to at least earn minimum wage. And then I will also have another crack at HB 2000, the bill I just talked about, that will lower the required minimum temperature from 80 degrees to 77 degrees for leased and rented properties. So I'm really looking forward to next week. It has been a long, exhausting, but productive week this week, and we will continue the fight next week. So I look forward to sharing more updates with you next week about some more of the progress that we're making. And I'll remind you that crossover is coming up. So the amount of time that the House members have to pass House bills in order for them to cross over to the Senate, and the Senate working on their Senate bills for them to cross over to the House, that is dwindling. So we've got a lot of work left, but a little bit of time to do it. So next week will be action-packed as well, and I look forward to bringing you that update. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you learned anything new or found anything intriguing or interesting, please be sure to share this with others so that they too can know some of the things that I'm working on up here in Richmond. I will talk to you soon, and maybe I'll see you this weekend in the district.